This week's Parsha, Shalach, meaning to send, as you can see, is found in the book of Numbers 13:2 and deals with the anxiety and trepidation that can accompany the experience of stepping into uncharted territory. The Torah portion describes how, following the exodus from Egypt, Moses sends 12 spies to explore the land of Israel. 10 of them convince the people that it's too difficult to conquer the land. God responds to their lack of confidence by punishing them with 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And finally, the Parsha ends with God commanding the Israelites to put fringes, tzitzit, on the ends of their clothing. So what does this all mean? And how are these elements connected? And what can we learn from this seemingly ancient tale? It's true that the children of Israel had escaped slavery and a life of abuse under the yoke of the ancient Egyptians. One would think that any living conditions would be better than what they experienced in their life of bondage. Yet in that life, they knew what to expect, and they didn't have any decisions to make, nor did they have any responsibilities. As slaves, they were told what to do and where to go. Now, out in the free world, everything was new and unfamiliar and very frightening. To help prepare the Israelites for what lay ahead, Moses sent scouts, latur, as I mentioned earlier, to bring back a report on what the land of Canaan was like. 12 scouts depart, one from each of the tribes, and the Parsha lists them name by name, as you saw today. They came back with a bunch of grapes so heavy that it took 2 people to carry them, and also a bunch of stories so heavy that they terrified the Israelites. To quote the Parsha, "The country that we traveled and scouted is one that devours those who dwell there. All the people we saw in it were giants. We looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and we must have looked like grasshoppers to them too." Hearing the scouts' report, note 10 out of the 12, the Israelites turned to Moses and Aaron, and they declared that they preferred to head back to Egypt and slavery rather than continue into danger. Even the protests of the 2 scouts, Caleb and Yehoshua bin Nun, were not enough to reassure them. In the end, most of the Israelites who had been slaves in Egypt could not see themselves entering the land, except as grasshoppers through the lenses of their fears. Caleb and Yehoshua, the 2 scouts who were able to recognize that the Israelites had the strength and the resources in them to succeed, had to wait to bring their wisdom to a new generation of Israelites. And for this reason, the Israelites were condemned to wander the desert for 40 years until a new generation, one who was born into freedom with a different mindset, could enter the promised land. The title of this week's portion is taken from the first few verses of the portion, where God tells Moses, "Send for yourself, shlach lecha." It almost reminds us of when Abraham is sent off to find himself, lech lecha, go unto yourself. So shlach lecha, spies to Canaan. The concept is that we are continually sending our thoughts into the future, wondering what it will be like. We have the choice to be positive and hopeful about the future or not, but not being positive has consequences. And the Israelites in the wilderness, like the Israelites in the wilderness, we should be continually learning to look into the future through the lens of our strengths rather than through the lens of our fears. So when the 10 spies spread their stories of fear and defeatism, Joshua and Caleb silenced the people before Moses, and they said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we certainly have us in it to do it." The 12 spies all saw the same things: the land of milk and honey, the incredible produce. They saw the fortified cities and the people who dwell there. They came to different conclusions based on their own appraisal of their abilities. Those who doubted forgot the incredible exploits crossing the Red Sea. They forgot God's might and support. They didn't even stop to ask themselves why such a strong people would need such strong fortifications. Maybe they needed such strong fortifications because they were also afraid. But they didn't think about that. And if we look at the Haftorah that we read today, just a generation later, when Yehoshua ben Nun goes to conquer Jericho, they learn from Rahab that the inhabitants of these fortified cities were actually terrified of the reputation that preceded the Israelites. So what can we learn from the experience of our ancestors? Firstly, we need to believe in ourselves and that we have the capacity to achieve our goals. Secondly, we should not let pessimism and negativity psych us out. And finally, as a community, we should support and uplift our leadership with constructive dialogue and action, as Caleb and Yehoshua did for Moses and Aaron. We should remember that our endeavor is ultimately for a noble goal of bringing community together to learn, to engage, and to do good. When God says to Moses at the end of the Parsha, tell the Israelites to make tzitzit, fringes, on the corners of their garments, we should remember as we gather the four corners of our talis, when we say the Shema prayer, we symbolically bring the spirit of our people together to celebrate as a community and to work together united to achieve our dreams. And with that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.